Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, hang on to your hats because this may be the strangest trial we have ever covered. Today was all about Brian Walshe and his shocking, completely unexpected defense. Now, normally, the first day of trial, opening statements, and it moves straight into being something that is all about the prosecution. It's their case. They're presenting their case, their witnesses, but nothing could overshadow Brian Walshe's opening statement today, the statement from his attorney. Now, a week ago, we thought we would be seeing a trial where Brian Walshe argued he had nothing to do with the death of his wife. Then the shocking news came roughly a week or so ago that Brian Walshe would plead guilty to lying to the police and to disinterment of his wife's body, basically disposing of her body. Those are felonies that together could net him up to 23 years in prison. And that left so many questions. Why would he plead guilty to those? How would he use this at trial? Like, how would it benefit him? Could it even conceivably benefit him? So all of that was frankly very baffling. But today we finally got answers to how Brian Walshe plans to use this at trial. And I think it's safe to say it stunned most people. Now, Brian Walshe is laying it all on the table in an effort to avoid life in prison. Can it possibly work? Let's get into what happened today on the first day of Brian Walshe's trial. Would you please hit the like button? And also, if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe. We would love to have you back for more videos. And so let's do just a super quick summary since this is the first day of trial. A lot of you may not know about it yet. I've got several videos on this case and you can catch up quickly, but I'll give you a quick summary. So Ana Walshe went missing on January 1st, 2023. Brian, her husband, was with their 3 young children in Boston where the two of them lived. Ana, meanwhile, had moved to DC where her job was. And Brian says the family planned to move there. And more on why he couldn't move in just a minute. You will hear that in the opening statements. But Brian said he thought that Ana had returned to DC on the 1st because she had a work emergency and she had to get there. He did not call police, even though she went missing on January 1st because she, as he says it, went to work in DC. He didn't call the police until January 4th. And even then, it's not entirely clear just how voluntary his call to police was. Now, as they looked for Ana, police say they found a trail leading right up to Brian Walshe's doorstep. They found strange purchases at Home Depot and lots of other stores, trips to local apartment complex dumpsters, blood in the basement of the family's home, to name just a few of the many pieces of evidence that they have collected. So now Brian Walshe is on trial for the murder of his wife. Her body has never been found. And he believes that he has the perfect defense because her body has never been found. We will get into that. A special note, it is the first week of December. For those of you who have been around the channel for a while, you know that it's Mods Week on our channel. So all super chats this week will go to our very special, very beloved moderators, Marlon and mamapinks. They are with us all year, work like crazy to keep everything calm and happy and moving forward in the chat. I'm so grateful to them. So all super chats go to Marlon and mamapinks for this week. So many thanks to them. All right, so the end all be all today was the defense opening statement. That was the big moment we had all been waiting for. And that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to take a look at most of it and look at and analyze it and talk about what exactly the argument is. Now, this was the jaw-dropping moment when the defense lawyer made his very first statement to the jury and acknowledged a whole lot of things on Brian Walshe's behalf, like that he lied to police repeatedly, We are going to watch some clips from this jaw-dropping opening statement together. Now, before I show you that, you need to know about one argument that happened before the trial got started, outside the presence of the jury. So remember, I told you that Brian has pled guilty to 2 very serious charges: disposing of the body of his wife, which obviously would only happen if she's dead. And then he's also, he also has pled, what is the other thing he's pled guilty to? Here, let me go back to intimidation of a witness, juror, police, or court official, essentially lying to the police. So those are the 2 things that he's pled guilty to. Well, the defense apparently is pushing for that to come in to trial, the fact that he has pled guilty. And you can see why that would be an advantage to them. It's Brian Walshe, they will say, taking responsibility. And the only reason he would do that is because he knows he's innocent of the bigger charge of murder. The prosecution apparently does not want this in for that very reason. Maybe they're concerned that the jury will look at this and decide, well, maybe he's already paying enough for this. Maybe they won't convict him of the murder. So I assume that the defense saw this as an extremely, very significantly, extremely difficult case. And they saw this plea as their only possible way out. I think, though, it will be very hard to convince a jury of this. I'm going to just say that. I think it's going to be very difficult. So the judge said, well, if you want me to rule now, I can. We can wait until we get further into trial if you want, but there's no case law on this. So I'm just like ruling in the dark, and I'll be glad to do that right now if you want. And so nobody demanded a ruling, though, because both sides said, well, I'm not going to use this in my opening. And so the judge did warn the prosecution then, like, look, if the defense uses this, I haven't ruled that they can't. So there's nothing wrong with them using it if they choose to do that. You just heard the defense lawyer say he's not going to, but if he uses it, I'm not going to stop him or penalize him because I haven't ruled that he cannot. He's not violating any order from the court. So, in fact, the defense did not mention it per se, not exactly, but everything all around it. You're about to hear it. And you are going to hear the craziest opening sentence of an opening statement of all time. I am convinced that never before in the history of opening statements has there been a first sentence like this. So we're about to hear that. Before I do, I want to say thank you to all the people putting super chats in for our mods, Marlon and Mama Pinks. Jenda Bomb started it all off. Thank you for doing that. And Jennifer Jansen also, great mods. Could not agree more. Thank you, Jennifer. Much appreciated. And Trisha S. also coming in. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep popping these up. Just know how grateful we are for this. And like I say, it's Mods Week on the channel. So, okay. And Laza1511, who has been a member for 13 months and says this defense is wild. Isn't that the case? That is really, really true. This is going to be quite the trial. I think we are really going to enjoy following that on the channel. I think you will all enjoy it. I could not agree more. K. Taylor Minor, Marlon and Mama Pinks are the best mods on all of YouTube. So we'll go ahead and get into the video, but we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so let's pop up the video.
You'll hear the evidence. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best.
Let's move it back.
Walshe lied to the police. Lied to him on January 4th, lied to him on January 5th, lied to him on January 7th.
Okay, so it's super soft. So let me tell you what he says. He says, Brian Walshe lied to the police. He lied to them on January 2nd, on January 4th. He lied to them on January 5th, and he lied to them on January 7th. First thing he states to the jury. This is his very first sentence of the entire trial. I'm not going to count jury selection, although that does count in a different way. It is still very important. But his first statement is Brian Walshe lied to the police. That is their defense. They are actually acknowledging that he lied to the police. They aren't hiding it. They aren't running away from it. And that is an enormous risk to Brian Walshe because credibility during a trial is all important. Think about how it pitches Brian Walshe. And later I'm going to tell you, I think he has to take the stand. We'll get to that in a minute. But his credibility depends does the jury believe him? And he's already acknowledged lying once. So that leaves kind of the Alec Murdaugh opening, which is, okay, if you would lie to that person or those people, what makes me think you wouldn't lie to me? Why am I so unique and special that you wouldn't lie to me? In other words, I don't trust you. I don't trust you at all. I don't trust you in any way. Nothing you say is convincing to me because I don't know whether it's the truth or not. That makes it very difficult for the jury to believe Brian Walshe. And he is the central witness in this entire case because of the fact of his defense. And it is going to be very difficult for the jury to believe him because he cast himself as a liar. He's admitted that up front. Now, he even goes a little further than that.
Brian Walshe went to Lowe's and bought tools. Brian Walshe went to Home Depot and bought tools. Brian Walshe, beginning about 4:54 a.m., began a frantic and tragic search that you'll hear about. You'll hear the evidence of that. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best to dispose a body to even darker subject matter. As he wrestled with the fact that Ana Walshe was dead. That evidence that you will hear will be hard to understand, but it is true. On January 1st of 2023, Jim Mutlow left the family home of Brian and Ana Walshe sometime between 1 and 1:30 in the morning. Ana and Brian Walshe continued.
Let's stop it and talk a little bit about what you're hearing. Hopefully hearing. I realize it is pretty soft. So over and over, he says that it's going to be hard to understand this, that it's hard to believe. I'm not sure that's a powerful argument because it again tells the jury, look, you may have a hard time believing what Brian Walshe is going to tell you. Well, the problem with telling the jury that, and the problem with the fact that that's the case, is that the jury has to believe Brian Walshe, or they have to believe all the mountain of evidence that the prosecution is going to put in. So that is putting it in pretty stark relief. If they don't believe what Brian Walshe tells them, and it's going to be hard to understand, then that's a problem for the defense. So he says that over and over. And then he starts talking about the night that Ana Walshe disappeared and is presumed to have been killed. It was New Year's Eve. They had a friend over who left after midnight. And according to Brian Walshe, they were in bed by about 1:30. And he's saying that sometime between 1 and 1:30, the friend left and then they hopped in bed. They continued. Here's what the defense lawyer is saying in opening.
The news. He went upstairs to the bedroom. About an hour later, you'll hear evidence that Mr. Walshe got up, went back downstairs to clean the kitchen.
So I do want to point this out. It is 2:30 in the morning on New Year's Day, and Brian Walshe says he gets up and is cleaning the kitchen. So ladies, if you have a fella who gets up at 2:30 in the morning to clean the kitchen, I want you to put that in the comments. I want to know how many of you have a guy who gets up at 2:30 in the morning to clean the kitchen. That is truly, in and of itself, remarkable. Oh, darn it.
You will hear evidence. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best to dispose a body to even
I moved it a little too far. Let's go back.
54 a.m. began a frantic and tragic search that you'll hear about. You'll hear the evidence of that. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best to dispose a body to even darker subject matter. As he wrestled with the fact that Ana Walshe was dead. That evidence that you will hear will be hard to understand, but it is true. On January 1st of 2023, Jim Mutlow left the family home of Brian and Ana Walshe sometime between 1 and 1:30 in the morning. Ana and Brian Walshe continued to
We'll move it just a little bit further because we just talked about that. Let's move it a little bit further.
Mr. Walshe got up, went back down the stairs to clean the kitchen. See evidence that he looked at his email. You'll hear evidence that he then returned to the bedroom, intending nothing more than to crawl into bed with Ana Walshe, the woman he loved. When he entered the bedroom and began to get into the bed, he sensed something was wrong. You will hear evidence that it made no sense to him. But he nudged Ana, his wife. She didn't respond. He nudged her again, a little harder. She didn't respond. He nudged her now in a frantic and panic reaction to where she actually rolled off the bed. You'll hear evidence that now he is panicking and he doesn't understand what has happened and what is happening.
I found that interesting about the rolling off. That is exactly what Corey Richins says about her husband. I thought, well, that's curious that she came back. She is accused of poisoning her husband, but that she came back and he rolled off the bed.
It didn't make any sense to him. It didn't make sense that somebody that he had just been with and enjoyed New Year's Eve into New Year's Day would suddenly be dead.
Do you see the problem, though? If it didn't make sense to Brian Walshe, why does it make sense to the jury, right? That's the problem with arguing, I'm a liar, but now you can believe me. That makes it really difficult. The jury needs somebody they can trust in general, period. I can believe you. And they aren't going to get that with Brian Walshe. It makes for a big barrier as he tries to present his side of the case.
You will hear evidence in this case of sudden, unexplained death. You will hear evidence that it is. You will hear evidence that it happens in young people and old people. You will hear evidence it happens in male and female. You will hear evidence it happens during the day and during the night, that it happens to trained athletes. You will hear evidence that it can be the result of both mechanical and or electrical problems within the body. You will hear evidence that it might be cardiovascular, pulmonary, neurological, or other reasons. You will hear evidence that it occurs in people who have never manifested a symptom that something might be wrong. And in fact, you will hear evidence that sometimes the first manifestation that something is or was wrong with someone is the sudden, unexplained death. That's the evidence you will hear. Sudden, unexplained death is known within the medical community and the forensic community. But it is to this day not well understood, and that is the evidence you will hear. And it is not well known to non-medical professionals. And you will hear evidence. Brian Walshe never imagined somebody suddenly died. 1 hour he's with her, he cleans the kitchen, he comes back up, and she is dead.
Do you see how this is the perfect defense, which actually I think is going to make it harder to believe? But do you see how it's perfect? If a defendant can dispose of a body so that there's no evidence from the body, it allows the only person who was with them to say it was sudden, unexplained death. And it could happen to anyone, anytime, and there could be no signs and no symptoms beforehand. It just out of the blue could happen to anyone, anywhere, and it happened to her. That is a big hurdle for the jury to jump over, because it deals with every single problem, doesn't it? It deals with, oh, she didn't have symptoms before. She was totally healthy. She was a young woman. She was not someone who was really ill, who was on death's doorstep to start with. This really shouldn't have happened at this age. And she was fine earlier in the evening when the friend was over. That wasn't a problem. And it doesn't necessarily fit any particular pattern. It doesn't necessarily only happen to people who are unhealthy or older. It could happen to anyone, anytime. And that is the perfect defense. If you don't have the body, right? It would apply to anyone. They could say, anyone could say sudden unexpected death, sudden unexplained death. They could say that at any time if the body isn't there to contradict it. So in a case where a defendant has disposed of a body, which Brian Walshe admitted that he did, it makes for a perfect defense to cover every possible thing in a way that no one can contradict, but that the jury still has to believe. And I think, of course, that is going to be the problem. Now, the defense had to acknowledge some problems with Brian Walshe's case, some problems that were going to come up in the prosecution's case that the jury is about to hear. Could not ignore, for example, the fact that there were some stresses in their marriage. The Commonwealth must not have a lot here, except for one really huge thing that you were going to hear about, because the defense is not just arguing that it was not all that bad, or he didn't really hate her enough to have done anything bad. They're saying it was a great marriage. They're going so far as to say they were really happy and they had a good marriage.
You will hear evidence in this case that Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe loved each other. Yes, there was stress in the marriage. Stress born out of a simple problem that took its toll. And that's the pending federal case that had begun in 2018 and was still going forward. And what happened was, over time, Ana Walshe got a job in D.C. with the support of Brian Walshe. It was a huge stepping stone in her career. It paid twice the salary. And they talked about it, and you will hear evidence that they had to make a decision. Brian could not leave Cohasset because of the pending federal case. So who would take care of the children? Well, Ana worked in D.C. Brian would. And he did. There was stress in commuting back and forth between D.C. and Cohasset.
Okay, so this guy is completely unafraid. This is one brave attorney, because think about he is opening up every can of worms just right up front. It's just spilling out everywhere. Okay, yeah, they were having some marriage trouble. Okay, yeah, there was a federal fraud case. Okay, yeah, he lied to the police. But when he gets on the stand, you can believe every word that he says, because this time he's going to tell you the truth. He may have defrauded people in this federal case, and he may have lied to the police, but you're getting the really clean, upright version. That's what you're about to get. So, but he keeps going. Another can of worms. Brian not only was on probation and had to stay home, as he's mentioned, as that he was caring for the children, but also Ana was having an affair.
Yes, there was an affair. You will hear evidence of an affair. An affair does not make someone a bad person does not make someone a bad mother. Make no mistake about that. But yes, there was an affair, not between Brian Walshe and anyone, but between Ana Walshe and William Faster. The evidence in this case will be that Ana Walshe did everything she could to hide that affair. That she did not tell her closest friends, her confidants, some of whom lived in D.C., the same person, Alyssa Kirby, that she spent December 29th with, drinking and talking about her life. She hid the affair. William Faster will tell you that he was unaware of any plans of Ana ever telling Brian about the affair. William Faster will testify.
He's the one with whom she was having an affair, as I understand the prosecution case.
That they behaved differently in public in D.C. to make sure there was no appearance of the affair. William Faster will testify that Ana Walshe told him she would be devastated if Brian ever learned about the affair. Brian Walshe didn't know about the affair. He did know Ana Walshe had a crush on William Faster because she told him. And he did not react in a jealous way. And you will hear evidence that over the close to decade that these two people were in love, and all you have to do is look at the evidence and the photograph you'll see of Ana Walshe. And the evidence will establish she is a beautiful woman. And it was not unusual for her to comment to Brian, I had some man look at me today. I think he liked her. That didn't upset Brian, not over a period of 10 years. And when she told him that she had a crush on William Fastow, the man who had sold them the $1.3 million townhouse in D.C., it didn't upset Brian. He trusted her. Told her, I wish he would be jealous.
So I want you to think about kind of what he's doing here, because notice that over and over again, he's telling these stories that put Ana in a bad light. He's, she would taunt him with, I think other people looked at me. I think a man looked at me. I think he liked me. And she, in fact, was having an affair, even if the defense is going to say Brian didn't yet know about that at the time she disappeared. But these things are not unintentional. They are also designed, I think, to cast Ana in a negative light, that she is the kind of person who would go behind Brian's back, who would cheat on him. She's the kind of person who would taunt him with the idea that other men liked her and thought she was beautiful. And I think those things are not an accident. Notice how subtly the defense is doing this, though. They're doing it as part of the defense, that he didn't know about the affair. He had no idea this was going on. And he wasn't the jealous type. So he wasn't somebody who would fly off in a rage and kill his wife. That's exactly what the defense is trying to argue. So they now are going to rip the top off yet another can of worms, this one being potential financial problems that might have led Brian to want to off his wife. However, they're going to argue there really weren't any. Unlike some of these other things where they're, Ana was having an affair. We can't argue what she did. We can just say Brian didn't know. In this case, they're going to say there weren't any problems at all.
You'll hear evidence that there was no financial issues or problems. Ana Walshe just got that job in the early part of 2022 that paid close to $300,000. They own that townhouse in D.C. It was worth over $1 million. They owned whole life insurance policies on their sons in the amount of $1 million each. Whole life that you will hear you can borrow against if you need cash. You will hear evidence that Brian Walshe's mother gifted them money, and actually you'll hear from the landlord of the home that they were living in at the time that Brian was living in, taking care of the 3 boys while Ana worked in D.C., that it was his mother who was paying the rent, because that's what grandmothers do. There was no financial problems here. They owned investment property in Massachusetts.
So the argument then by the defense is that all these people had money, not necessarily including Brian, but his wife was earning $300,000. His mother had plenty of money to hand, and in fact, was paying his rent. I don't understand why that is. I'm not clear at all that that's what grandmothers do. In fact, that strikes me as unusual. But apparently, his mother was paying the rent of the home there in Massachusetts while Ana lived in DC and they had not moved to it. So this argument is all about how there's no financial problem, there's no financial motive for Brian to have killed his wife. That didn't really make sense. In fact, they go so far as to say it was a good marriage and Brian was fully committed to
The
it.
evidence in this case is that Brian Walshe loved Ana Walshe. You will hear that she spoke of him in glowing terms to William Faster. She talked about her relationship with Brian with Alyssa Curry. And notwithstanding the fact that Ana Walshe was having an affair, she described their relationship as open and honest. He believed their marriage was open and honest because he loved her. You will hear how she described Brian as her best friend to her friend Alyssa Curry. William Faster will tell you that he was unaware of any plans of Ana ever telling Brian about the affair.
So, in fact, one of the arguments the defense makes is the way they were feeling on the night of New Year's Eve when their friend was over was very forward looking. Everybody was looking forward to the new year. They were all happy. There was nothing in what they were doing that suggested it was about to end between Brian and Ana. They were, in fact, looking at buying investment properties in DC together. They were looking ahead.
12:25, Ana Walshe and Brian Walshe are texting each other, and she is sending him 7 properties, listings, primarily out of Zillow, 7 listings of properties in the greater DC area. Bethesda, Annapolis. They're searching for future investment property. You'll see that, and you'll hear evidence that then she comes up to celebrate Christmas with Brian and their 3 beautiful boys. You'll see on 12/28, text exchange between Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe. Now, she's back in DC. She's not feeling well. She's telling Brian, I don't feel well. So I'm going to stay at home and work at home today in DC. And they joke. And on the text, Brian says something like, well, I guess I'll have to get you a plunger.
I think that little bit right there was kind of a hint that maybe there was something wrong with Ana, that there was a lead up to this that everybody missed. In fact, she wasn't feeling well a few days before this disappearance, before this, what Brian Walshe says is a sudden, unexplained death. She was feeling badly. So badly, she decided to work from home instead of going into the office. And that might explain this sudden death. So I think there was a little hint being dropped of that here in opening statement. Give it just a second. It's still playing.
And responds, I'll tell you what. I'll buy the plunger. You buy me that Porsche. Why? Because Ana Walshe wanted a Porsche. And what you see on that text exchange, right after she says that, is you'll see postings that he sent to her of the Porsches he'd been shopping for the woman he loved. And you'll see in his medical that he was shopping for Porsches because she had asked for them. And how
Now, buying a Porsche when you don't have a job is basically spending your wife's money on the car she wants, because she was the one earning the money. So he wasn't earning the money. But I think the point in the story that the defense is trying to make is that he cared about her. He wanted her to have good, nice things she wanted. He was the kind of husband who cleaned up the kitchen at 2:30 in the morning and bought you a Porsche if you wanted one. I think that's the argument that the defense is pitching. And the attorney went on to talk about how on December 29th, so two days, 2.5 days before the disappearance, the two were texting back and forth with sweet photographs of Ana with their two boys. And she texted some and he texted her some back, all of Ana with the boys. And he's going to talk about those texts are going to come in. Here's what the defense thinks is important about them.
How do they sign off these texts? You'll see them. Brian says, love you. And Ana Walshe says, love you too. And what were they talking about?
So, and he's going to switch. Well, I cut out a little bit here because I didn't want to play the whole thing, but they're now he's now going to be talking about that New Year's Eve when the friend came over. Brian is cooking for the three of them. They're about to enjoy a lovely evening together. They're all going to have a lot of fun. The friend is apparently going to testify they had no clue that something like this could happen within hours of the time he left. So it was a happy night.
The future. They were talking about investments. Ana Walshe told a story about how Brian had found a ring for her and the whole adventure of finding the ring and buying the ring. She talked about it in glowing terms when she talked about how Brian did that. Mr. Mutlow will describe that for the 4 or 5 hours that he was there, he saw no problems between them. He said that Brian was happy and Ana was happy. He described the atmosphere as jovial, festive. He described it as, she wrote, let's.
And one of the things they did, he described it as loving. I think that word got cut out there, but one of the things they did that night was sign, it sounds like the box of that the champagne for the evening came in. And they all signed it with happy notes. Here's what he says Ana wrote.
Make 2023 the best one yet. She went on to say, courage, love, perseverance, compassion, joy, and signed it, love. The other evidence will be
one of the, yet another problem, yet another can of worms that the defense addressed in opening statements is the searches that Brian Walshe did for information about getting divorced, about what state would be best for a man to get divorced in. And obviously the problem of that evidence for the defense is that it makes it look like maybe Brian thought they really were going to get divorced. Maybe he was expecting that, and therefore he knew the gravy train was coming to an end. This Ana supporting him, supporting the children, him staying home, all of that was coming to an end. In addition to the fact that his federal case was coming to a final point at which things would become resolved one way or the other. And he and Ana both believed that he might be going to prison. And so all of those things were happening. It was a very stressful time. This is what the prosecution is arguing. And the defense says, okay, granted, he searched for this information about states to get divorced in, but you, the state, have completely misunderstood the context. It is not because they were about to get divorced, because they felt like they didn't love each other anymore or they wanted to be apart. Instead, it all had to do with how they could protect their children in light of the federal fraud case against Brian. Here's what he said.
That singular search occurred between conversations between Ana and Brian about the sale of their property. You'll see that search occurred about 8:30 on 12/27. And why is that important? The evidence will show that the only time Ana Walshe talked about divorce with William Fastow, she talked about it in terms of Brian and I attempting to preserve the family assets. Why is that important? Because yes, there was $400,000 of restitution that was going to come due. And yes, Brian may have had to go to prison for some time. And what did that?
Frankly, he had a very, very sweet deal lined up with no really likely prison time expected, very minimal. He had worked it out really well. We may do a separate video just to cover that art fraud case because I doubt they'll cover it in detail here. And it's really interesting, but we'll wait. We'll get to that. By the way, if you are just coming in, if you would hit the like button, I would really appreciate that. It helps YouTube know we are awake and we are now live streaming.
It mean that there was going to have to be arrangements, not just to pay the money, which wasn't going to be a problem, but the boys had to move up to DC because Brian could no longer take care of them. And there would be all that added expense. And they went so far as to talk to Robin Howe, their nanny, their babysitter, and asked her if she would consider moving up. So there were expenses. So when you talk about preserving the family assets, you have to decide, how is it that I make sure, how is it, as Brian Walshe will tell you, how is it that I make sure that my wife and my 3 sons are financially secure if I have to go to prison for a day, for a week, for a month, or for a year? And in all of the other digital data that the Commonwealth has been poring over for 2 years, you will not hear evidence of any other conversations about it. And you won't hear it from William Fastow. In fact, William Fastow will tell you he had resigned himself to think Ana Walshe was never going to leave Brian, father of their children.
That argument actually resonated with me a little bit in that it was surprising that there weren't more searches about that. If it was front and center or something heavily discussed and debated between the two of them, they were really on the cusp of a divorce. 2 searches over, that's really pretty small. But I think the thing that will hurt Brian Walshe here is that one of those searches was best place for divorce for a man. And if all that mattered was the children and separating the finances so that if he went to prison, so that this restitution would not be owed by Ana, there wouldn't have been a need to search for that specifically. So I think that will end up hurting them. I do think there was surprisingly little discussion of divorce with friends, with relatives, among the 2 of them showing up on their texts or their exchanges. It is less than you might expect. So I think the defense will make a small point there. I don't know that it will carry the day, but I think they'll have something. So next problem that the defense is going to address is the body, because Brian Walshe is now acknowledging that he found one. He found Ana dead in their home. So why did he dispose of that? Now we're going to have an explanation.
And then the impossible, the unimaginable happened. It didn't make sense to Brian Walshe. It was confusing. He never thought anybody would believe that Ana Walshe was alive 1 minute and dead the next. And all he could think about were those 3 boys. What would happen to their 3 boys now that Ana is no longer here? What will happen if they think he did something bad to Ana? Where will those 3 boys go? And so, he told the story. He tried to hide so he could hang on to those boys. Brian Walshe never killed him. Brian Walshe never thought about killing him. He would never think about that.
And there,
He's not guilty.
and there he ends it. All right, let's pull that out. We'll see. Let me know what the video quality is, please, Marlon. I would appreciate hearing how it all shakes out with StreamYard tonight. So what you have just heard is one of the most astonishing opening statements I've ever heard. This is just really amazing, because what you have just heard is a defense that has provided sort of a closing for every issue, but they've done it by acknowledging that their client, the defendant, is a liar. He lied to police, and he did something with the body of his wife because he didn't want anyone to know. Now, the story is he did it for the children. It was a noble thing in that he wanted to protect the children. I assume if this gets fleshed out with Brian Walshe testifying, that he'll say he knew he was on probation, and if people suspected him of having harmed his wife. There's no way he would get that. He would be allowed to stay out of prison. He would definitely get prison time. He would be sent away. The children would be alone. And so, as a noble thing, in order to protect them, he put himself in the role of destroying the body of his wife so no one would know that she had been found dead in the home. That's the story. That is his story. I want to know what you were thinking so far. Now that we finally know the defense that Brian Walshe is going to put out, what do you think of it? Let me know in the chat and in the comments, because I am really wondering what you think. So the defense has now set the themes for this case going forward. The prosecution, Brian Walshe the prosecution already was going to say Brian Walshe is a liar. He lied to us. Here are all the facts that show he lied to us. But now we all agree to that. Everyone agrees to that, including Brian Walshe. And the prosecution was going to say he killed his wife and lied to cover it up. The defense is going to say, yep, lied to cover it up, but he didn't kill her. And the prosecution was going to say he even disposed of her body. And the defense is going to say, well, that part's true. So the defense is, as we now heard it, sudden unexplained death for absolutely no reason. Ana died in the middle of the night, no warning. Nobody had any idea other than that little hint that she was feeling a little under the weather and stayed home from the office a few days before. Other than that, no one noticed she was sick. No one's going to argue, unless the defense gets up and does, unless Brian Walshe does, that this was something that showed in any way that Brian Walshe killed her. Instead, the defense is going to say this was sudden death. No one had any idea. He had no idea either. So overall, this was already a super difficult case for the defense. And they saw this as their only possible out. It will be very hard, though, I think, to convince the jury about this. I do think it guarantees that he has to testify. And the reason for that is the defense lawyer told the jury over and over, you're going to get evidence that he thought this. Like he thought, oh no, what will I do? He thought, I must protect the children. No one can testify to that except Brian Walshe. Nobody has that knowledge except Brian Walshe. Nobody can even testify that she was dead at 2:30 in the morning when he woke up, that it was, no one knew that except for Brian Walshe because of the disposal of the body. So I think it guarantees that he will testify. He is gambling absolutely everything, putting everything on the table in the hopes of not getting life in prison. Will it work? The prosecution then moved into absolutely beast move straight into the lies of Brian Walshe by putting up Sergeant Harrison Schmidt and playing all those tapes where he came to the police, where the police came to him, they interviewed him, and he said, oh yeah, she went back to DC, and I saw her that morning. My son saw her that morning. She said she loved him to my son. She kissed me goodbye, he said, and one time, and another time he said, I didn't see her. I was asleep the whole time. But either way, it all suggested she was alive and that she left and that he had no clue during that entire time that she was gone. Now he is saying, his defense is saying, yep, he knew she was dead. He sat there and lied to the police. He told them these stories over and over again, convincingly. He sounded convincing, and he told them these lies. And the prosecution did so well, moving absolutely straight into what he had admitted. He said he lied to you. Watch this. Watch these interviews when you will see him lie straight, looking at the police officers. Well, a lot of them are audio, but you will hear him lie. You will see that happens. Okay, so let's do some Q&A, and I also want to talk a little bit about the super chats and how much I appreciate these coming in from Marlon and Mama Pinks. And let's go back to the very top too, because I haven't said anything to my first 5 tonight. So I got to find out who were my first 5. I'm trying to go back. Boy, it's a long way. Y'all have been commenting a lot. I love that. Thank you. That's helpful and a lot of fun too. Also want to thank Neuropsych Xena specifically for that really nice, generous super chat. All super chats all week long are for our mods, Marlon and Mama Pinks. Okay, so Desert Rose, Loretta Powell, Shiro Sheena, Susan L. Prince, and Bonbon RPH, our first 5 tonight. Welcome. Special shout out to all of you. Thank you for being in the first 5. Okay, let's go back and see how we are doing on our questions. I missed Marlon telling me. I asked him to tell me, and then I got so busy talking that I did not look for that. So I don't know. Maybe you can see me. Maybe you can't. So Sunset Gazing wants to know if Venmo or PayPal will be okay to give for our double trouble, Marlon and Mama Pinks, Eminem, and now Jerry, the best mods on YouTube. I totally agree with that. And yes, you can Venmo or PayPal me. That is in the description below. And that's always a way you can do it. And anything, it doesn't really matter where. If you want to give it there, just Venmo me and say what it's for, that it's for Marlon and Mama Pinks, and then I'll know. So yes, you absolutely can do that. All right, let's look for, did forget to say question marks at the beginning, if you would, please. Okay, so what is the maximum penalty for the charges to which he pleaded guilty? C. Lisa asked. What it looked like to me, and I don't practice in Massachusetts, is 23 years if they all got added together in maximum sentence. That's what it looked like to me. All right. Marlon's saying, Marlon has been a member for 21 months, and he is thanking everybody for all the super chats and donations. He is writing in with Jerry, the most famous dog in the Netherlands, and Marlon's dog, of course. Bonbon wants to know, can the defense legally present such a crazy case when they likely know it is a fib? It is quite the case. The defense cannot present, they can't put the defendant on the stand if they know he is going to lie. And in this case, they know that what he's going to say because they're making that very argument for him. So they must believe that it is not a fib. That's what they would have to believe, that they must believe that there is a good faith basis for this and that he's telling them. And in a sense, no one else was there. So I guess you could argue that there is a basis for it. Will the jury buy it, though? Will the jury buy? Dim Ben having a hard time with Nightbot. Nightbot has given us fits. It's really hard to control. We're grateful to YouTube for providing that, but gosh, it's really difficult. We turned off every setting we can think of, and it's still out there ready to take your comment down, but not you. Please make a comment, and hopefully it won't take it down. Marlon and Mama Pinks have some tips that they can give you to try to prevent that. Okay, Freddie's cat. Without a body, what ways could the Commonwealth go to prove it was intended unaliving executed by Brian? And what they have to do is go in all these different directions like they have done. No one was there. You're absolutely right. They can't just, there's no person who can say right before he attacked her, he yelled, "I'm intending this. I meant to do this." That's not going to happen, and rarely would it, right? So they're looking at other things. What about text messages? What were the motives? What were the reasons he might do this? What was said to other people? Did he lie? Did he try to cover it up? Is there consciousness of guilt? So those are the kinds of things that they're looking to. But the defense is rolling the dice, putting it all out there. They are arguing that there cannot be proof that there was this intended killing. You're absolutely right. That is the crux of the case. That is where everything will come down. All right, Juju Be Mad wrote, but if Brian didn't trust the police enough to call them after she died, why should a jury trust him in his story? That is exactly what they are going to have to answer. He looked at the police and he lied to them. This is the Alec Murdaugh problem, right? Remember, Alec Murdaugh got up there on the stand and he looked at the jury and he said, okay. And the prosecution took him through, and you lied to this person and that person and this other person, and you stole from this person and that person. And he said, okay, true, but I'm telling you the truth. And this is especially a problem for Brian because he lied in this case. about this issue. He's saying now, I knew what had happened, and I lied to cover up the fact that it happened, and I disposed of the body to cover up the fact that it happened. So let's go back and make sure we acknowledge all these people bringing in gifts for our mods, which I'm very grateful for. Let's see. I think we were at Beth. Beth's super chat, much appreciated. And we've got Kay Taylor Miner has been a member for 21 months. That is awesome. And I'm glad you're enjoying this. Pascaline joined us since Adelson. We are so glad to have you, Donna Adelson. And thanking our mods. Blue Day 9, a member for 4 months. Welcome. And we are glad to have you as a member. Thank you. And TMY Diaz, another super chat for our mods. Kathy Del Vecchio, much appreciated. Mainstream Views, thank you. Neuropsych Zena, what a lovely, generous gift. I know Mama Pinks and Marlon will appreciate that. And no doubt Jerry will get a special sweater or something for that. So thank you. Pascaline, thanking Neuropsych Zena for such a nice, generous gift. Much appreciated for them. And I'm going to look through here. Well, I'll stop right there with Jerry Brown. Thank you. Much appreciated. And I'm going to go down and see if we have any questions down here at the bottom. I don't think we do. So we'll skip back over here and we'll come back. Okay, my goodness. I have water and I'm still coughing a little bit. All right. Camilla Juliana asking me, how does a judge keep a jury open-minded after they hear all the evidence against the defendant? Camilla Juliana, the judge doesn't really exactly have to do that. The jury is allowed to close its mind once it has heard the evidence. It's the evidence that enables them to make up their minds. And so once they've heard the evidence, then they're allowed to do that. But what I think you're asking is, how does the judge keep the jury with an open mind all the way through the evidence so they can at least hear the defense side? The bottom line is that the judge can't do that. There are a few things that the judge will try to do, like in this case where the judge has told the jury, I don't want any of you on social media looking at the news. I want you to avoid it so that you don't get any outside influence. I don't want you reading the news about this case or anything like that. Try to stay away from all of that. So the judge can ask, please don't have any outside influence. Try to stay within the case. But if they ultimately become convinced fairly early on by the evidence, you can't stop that. And it happens all the time. In fact, in my view, it's pretty rare for juries to remain completely unbiased all the way through. A lot of times you'll hear the defense lawyer ask a question like, or not ask, but say to the jury, please don't make up your mind until I've had a chance to present my case. Please wait for me to go ahead and tell you what we think. Please give us a chance. You'll hear them say that a lot of times. We didn't hear that in the opening statement. They probably said something like that in the jury voir dire when they talked to the jury and when they selected the jury. But it is never easy. Once the jury begins to hear evidence, they start to form opinions. So that's just the way it works. Miss Annie K asking me, what do you think of opening's effect on jurors? And I assume, because she says, sorry, I was late, in case you covered it, I think she's talking about in this case. And in this case, one of the things that was of concern to me about the defense is that the defense kept saying things like, this is going to be hard to believe. And, shocking though it may be, I can't remember the exact words, but the idea behind it was, gee, this is going to be super hard for you, but really, truly, it's true. And you're going to have to kind of come along with us to believe this crazy story. And that's essentially acknowledging what the jury will probably be thinking. I think this is a very, very, very hard case. It is not going to be easy. So the prosecution laid out the evidence pretty methodically. This is what we're going to show, this, and it's a lot. And they only kind of scratched the surface of what we even know they have. So that's where they got started. And in terms of what I thought about the defense opening, I think they are really taking a shot at it. It's a gamble. I don't know that it will work, but I think that what they think their best shot is to try to convince the jury that although he lied about this, he's not lying to you now, and he's going to tell you this wild story, but it's all true and you can trust him. That is where the problem is going to come, because they can't trust him over here and they can trust him over here. And that's just going to be tough to believe. All right. Let's start at the back. Terry Webb, what a nice super chat. Thank you so much. That is very much appreciated. Thank you for that. For our mods, it's Mods Week here on the channel if you're just tuning in. And Pascaline is saying it's uneasy to follow the defense attorney. How can you recognize you cut your body's wife and expect you won't be convicted because there is no body found? Pascaline, you are really asking a great question, because I think it's going to be difficult for the jury to follow that line of reasoning. It's going to be difficult for them to say, okay, you lied to the police and you covered this up, but now you are up there telling the truth. You have become pure as the driven snow, and we, the jury, can trust you. I just think it's a tough argument. I think you are really pointing out the truth. Met Spunky, good to hear from you, and is happy to support Lee and the mods in the channel. Thank you. Much appreciated. I think we said this. Marlon is saying thank you to everybody and appreciating it. And another gift from Miss Spunky. Thank you. My goodness. And saying happy holidays to our mods. I believe Jinda Bomb had 3 different super chats. So thank you, Jinda Bomb. Appreciate that. Linda Mack, Megan Tomlinson, and Jadzia. I'm going backwards, so hopefully I'll hit everybody. Folks in 42. And Jerry Brown. I think I did it. I think I covered everybody. Okay, and I want to have a special shout out to Terry and the Neurosite Zena, who gave very generously to our mods, and also Miss Spunky. And there may have been more and I've forgotten it. So my bad if I did that. All right. I'm looking for more question marks at the beginning. I hear he wanted insurance money, says Chris Best, and laws need to change about the huge policies. Chris Best is talking about the fact that there were some insurance policies apparently on Ana, and often in these cases, that's one of the first places that law enforcement goes, is to figure out, okay, who would benefit from this murder? Is it someone who has a grudge? Is it someone who is being custody is not being allowed? Or maybe is it somebody who would stand to gain financially? So that's exactly where law enforcement heads. And she's pointing out that there has been some discussion about insurance policies on Ana. We don't fully have the state's entire case on that yet. We do know that the defense is saying he had plenty of money. He didn't need anything from her. And so we will find out more about what his argument is. I think he'll have to take the stand to say that. All right. What kind of person can dispose of their wife that they love so much? Another really good question. This is from L. Arnold. Right? I mean, and not just dispose of her, but based on the items that were purchased, like a hacksaw and this Tyvek suit and the garbage bags and things, multiple garbage bags, see, multiple trips to dumpsters all around town. All of that makes it sound like that he disposed of her body and he did something to the body beforehand to break it down and be able to put it in these bags, which is just like, how is that even possible? How does someone do that with a spouse? And remember this, he says he did it for the children because he would be separated from them, but it also meant they never got a chance to officially grieve their mother. There was never a moment in time when they were told, your mother died and your mother is gone and here's her funeral and you can say goodbye. That moment never came for them because of the way that he hid it, and because of the fact that he claimed to law enforcement until last week that he, in fact, had nothing to do with her disappearance. All right. Looking for questions. Let's see. What were the children doing during this crime? Race and Rodeo asks. A little hard to say because of the fact that no one actually knows precisely when it occurred. They are pretty sure it happened in the morning. If Brian gets on the stand, I presume he'll say there was a suggestion that it was nighttime, so the kids were asleep. But Brian did mention, or his counsel did in the statement, something about one of the children saying goodbye to the mother in the morning. So we'll find out a little bit more about that. That was a surprise. That wasn't something anyone had talked about before that. Jenna recommending I drink more water. I have to agree with that. So you think that the state will be hard or the defense? Tim Ben asks. I think the defense case is very hard here. This is a tough case for defense. That is my opinion. Thank you, Jadzia. Another super chat tonight. I think the first might have been a membership, but much appreciated. All right, we will finish up on Pascaline's question. The motive should be he's going to be jailed for the federal case and would not afford the financial situation. I think, Pascaline, that ultimately that's kind of where the prosecution will wind up. They're going to say that he was on his way to prison for fraud, or at least he was going to have some consequences. He needed to be able to pay that $400,000 because that was part of what would hopefully keep him out of prison. And he needed that money, and maybe she was withholding it. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that the prosecution's going to argue. And the defense is going to say just the opposite. They're going to say that he had all the money. If he needed the money, he could call on his mother or get it from another source. It wasn't going to ultimately affect him. All right. Well, you do not want to miss this trial. We will be here tomorrow at the same time. We talk facts, not fiction. And because with facts this strange, frankly, you don't need fiction in this case. So I will see you all tomorrow.